Alright, welcome back, guys. This is part number 4. We got 2 to go, 8 teams left. We're doing power rankings. I won't go through everyone up until 8, but obviously after you'll see where everyone stacks up below. Otherwise, you can always watch the videos previous. So, we're starting at number 8 and going through 5 in this video, and we're going to be starting with one of the teams with the best colors. We got the Honjo Spark. Very solid team last year. They were number 4 overall. Um, they lost to the Gladiators in the first round of the playoffs. Then in the losers bracket, came back, beat the Seoul Dynasty before falling to the San Francisco Shock 4-0 like everyone else did. So when we look at the Spark, not a ton of shakeup from last year. No more No Smite, who was their starting main tank for a little bit, and then Gushue really just kind of took it over. Um, so we're looking at, again, very very talented team. These guys have had a lot of time to play together. Um, they had a lot of close wins last year. They just found a way, won in map 5. So there's a couple of big things going for this team. Um, I think there's a ton of talent. You look at Sasin, you look at Godsby, Bazi. They're great. Rhea and Gushue, one of the best tank duos in the league. I think their support line is where there's a little bit, especially with BB. He didn't really stand out in a lot of parts last year for me, but still a solid player. And then IDK, one of the best Lucios. The man's a monster. He'll find an impact as a main support, which is kind of rare in this league. There's a lot of main supports in the league where like they're solid, they're good players. Some of them will shot call and they'll be good for you, but they can't carry. But there's a certain number of them. Some of my favorite players in the league to watch. IDK is one of them because he can just go bonkers on that main support role. So again, not much not to like about this team. They're a solid number 8. This is another one where you could say, how are they number 8? They were 4 last year. They should build on it. Yeah, I think a couple of teams made better moves than them in the offseason because they did stand pretty still. But this is still an amazing team. They're going to be playoff threats for sure. And depending on how like the DPSs shake out with the meta, this team could compete for a title for sure. So, moving on to 7. It's their sister city, brothers, the other Zhao, the Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou was a really interesting team last year. They had a lot of success at the end of the year, made a big run towards the play-ins, but they eventually did fall just short of the playoffs. Looking at this roster, it's loaded. It's another loaded roster. I honestly think that these top 8 teams, the rosters are all they are stacked. They made, I thought, a very good pickup in Neptuno, formerly of the Philadelphia Fusion. I assume he will take most of the playing time from Chara. Shu as the other support, very good player. I would say extremely underrated for most of last year. Um, People were talking about, Jonak still and Twilight and those guys, rightfully so, but he was another standout player, particularly on the Ana slash Zen. So, they also picked up Krong, who was a good player in Contenders Korea as well. WYA haven't, or Waya, where are you at? Um, is I don't know if that's actually what it stands for. I assume not. Um, but I haven't heard a whole lot about him. We'll see if he gets much playtime in the support role. I don't really see it. Like I said, Neptuno and Shu is a very very good duo in my eyes. And then when you look at the DPS, they have what I really like. I really like when the teams have the trio of 3 really good DPS players. Their hero pools. They don't have too much overlap. They can cover pretty much everything. You got Eileen, Nero, and Happy. All 3 of these guys can carry. Very talented. This was the youngest team in the league last year. They had a lot of time to really um, synergize and really just develop because they had struggles. They had a huge losing streak in the middle of the year, and then they really brought it back to finish ninth. So a super talented team. I like them a little bit more than Honjo just because I like their DPS. I really like their DPS line, and their support line has got to be one of the top ones as well. If anything, the tank line is a little bit of a question here, but Rio was very good last year, and Krong should be able to perform well also coming in. So we got the Charge at 7. Up to 6, we got the Philly Fusion. So, a team that, another team that they didn't make huge moves, but really liked the moves they made. You talk about they bring in Fury. A little interesting because they also locked up Poco, who they have the same role on the off tank. So that'll be a little bit interesting to see. I assume they would start Fury. I mean, Fury is nuts. Widely considered to be the best diva player in the world. So you have options there. Two extremely good players. You look at the DPS, EQO, Carpe, great duo. Hisu, watch out for him. He's an incredible player as well coming in. They also have a popular streamer Chipsa. I don't envision him seeing much playtime. I mean, these other three are honestly in a league above him, if you ask me. But again, you're looking for that trio, and for me, they got it. That's right. They also have Ivy, who was on Toronto last year. Again, I don't see a whole lot of playtime. I think EQO is pretty much same role as him, just a bit better. Um, I don't see any heroes that Ivy would stand out on more so than like Carpe or EQO. But DPS, absolute top tier. The supports, they have Funny Astro as their new um, support player. He was actually signed by Boston last year, but then there was a little bit of a scandal with him, so then he actually didn't sign on with them. He did eventually get into contenders. Very very good Lucio player. My only question with him is on the other roles. Can he still excel if Lucio is not meta? And then they have Alarm, who people have been waiting for Alarm to be in OWL for a long time. Um, people to give you an idea of how good he is. He's a guy that people are like, oh, is he better than Jonak coming in? So yeah, he's a monster. If we do get to see Zen at some point, it's going to be a treat to see him play on the big stage. So huge pickup there. I think he's a significant upgrade over Boombox, who is not a bad player. Boombox is not a bad player by any means, but Alarm is nuts. And then for the main tank, they still have Sato, who he's a solid player. He got a lot of flack in seasons 1 and 2 as kind of the weak link, but I do think he's a good player still. He's not going to kill their team as long as they have a good shot caller, and they can get their comms down. This team's talent is off the freaking charts. So we will see if Philly has a year like season 1, or if they don't really live up to expectations like last year. But they are coming in at 6. Number 5, before we get to our big 4, this is another one, might surprise people. I see a lot of people having them a bit higher. We got the Atlanta Reign. So, Atlanta coming in at a big 5. They were the only team in last year's playoffs to defeat the Shock. They sent them down to the losers bracket, where of course the Shock then ran off 4 consecutive 4-0s to make their way to the grand finals. But Atlanta, they beat them. They shouldn't have. A C9 gave them a 4-3 victory, but that's not to take anything away from them. They played extremely well in that match, and then they were eventually taken down by the New York Excel. So they pretty much bring back most of their team as well. The big additions, you got Sharp coming in from Team Envy of Contenders. You got Hawk, a tank player, and then a big pickup, in my opinion, Edison, a DPS player from Contenders Korea. As you can see, a lot of the new players from Contenders Korea, because there's a very large array of talent there. But otherwise, you bring back extremely good players like Pokebo, Gator, FRD. I think they have four really good tank players between those three and Hawk. The support line played really well last year. You got Dogman and Masa. I think even though they're both very good players, I think that's probably the weak point of this team. It doesn't quite stack up in my eyes to the top four at least. But then when you talk about the DPS, you bring in Sharp, who should have been in OWL a while ago, honestly. You got Edison, who is an absolute carry. You got Erster, one of the best players in the league last year, and then you also have Baby Bay, who I don't see him getting much time. I think he's probably the weakest of the four, but still a really solid player. Unless you just keep him off that Reaper. That was rough last year, but he's a great guy to have for team morale. He's gonna pump everyone up. This is Atlanta was like the high energy team last year. You got Dogman, calling people feeders in the middle of matches. Baby Bay making everyone laugh. So it was a fun team to watch. I think they're going to be extremely extremely good. Like I said, it's with these teams, it's nitpicks. I don't think the supports are quite as good as some of the very top tier teams, but this is a complete team. They are going to be a monster. So look out for them next year, or next week, I should say. So that is the end of part 4. We got the final episode coming out after this. Top 4 teams. The top 4 if you like look it up at all. It's just what order they're going to be in. So let me know what you guys think about these rankings. Again, this is the controversial range. I think. I think there could be very very good arguments for shifting these teams around. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next